Hello, fellow coder. Welcome back to the FreshVotes series. In this lesson, we will be adding to our new web view that we had created in the previous video. Where did that guy go? Let's go to the resources, templates. I believe it was the feature view. So we want to be able to create features inside of products that have already been created. So that is going to be our goal for this video. So in this HTML view, all we had was just an h1 tag, just a header saying new feature. So inside of this view, inside of this HTML page, we need to essentially be able to do the CRUD operations for the feature entity, right? Feature entity represents the database table, the feature database table. And that's, I believe, in the domain area we have here. It is the feature entity, right? So this Java object represents the database table, which if I go to my SQL workbench here, we have the feature table, which identifies a few columns, right? We have an ID, description, status, title, and product ID. So yeah, we need to essentially do or populate these three things: title, description, and status. Although status is going to be not directly populated by a user, but rather by a workflow. So a feature is first suggested, so it's sort of it's maybe in the suggested status or the new status, and then maybe the person who works on the product will look at it and say, yeah, I like that, it's now being considered. So now it's in the being considered status, and then it moves to the, I don't know, in progress status or in development, and then it's, to be released. I don't know, whatever statuses you want to have, you can then create inside of here. So let's essentially build out the workflow for these two. Build out the CRUD operation. So being able to create a title and a description for a feature request. That's going to be our goal for this video. Okay. Sorry, my alarm was going off there. I needed to put some dinner in the crock pot for later. So anyway, let's go ahead and create that page. So in the feature.html view, we're going to leverage two things here. First, we need to assume that we have something on our model. We have a feature on our model. We need to assume that. We'll create that in a second. That's why we can assume it's there. And two, we need to be using timeleaf to sort of bind an input element, so essentially a text box, with the Java object, the entity that's going to be in our model. So new feature. So first we want to, let's get the ugly version up and running. So we'll create a label and we'll call this title, right? And then we'll have an input type equals text that will be bound to the object that we're going to have on our model. We haven't put it on our model yet, but we'll call it a feature, right? We'll create a new feature. We'll put it on the model. So that will be the name of it. It will be feature. And then feature dot, we can do dot properties to access what is in the feature. So what are we doing here? What's this input box represent? It's going to represent the title for the feature, right? And we can say title because in the feature object, in the feature entity, it has a title, right? It's called title, and then it has a description. So there's a reason why I'm calling when I put this stuff in the HTML page. There's a reason why I'm calling it title and description and not anything different. I'm calling it that because that's exactly how it's referred to in the feature object, which is going to be on the model. So feature dot title. Okay, and then let's wrap that in a div for now. So that'll sort of put it on one line, and we'll have another div. Label is description, and same thing. Input type equals text. Th field equals feature description. Okay. I forgot to close my input there. And then do we have timeleaf? Yeah, we have timeleaf here. It doesn't know what a container is because that is coming from Bootstrap. So we will make this pretty in a second. Right now it's not going to look that great, but at least we will have the input types text elements on the screen, and they're bound to the feature entity that we're going to be placing on the model. And then we need to wrap this in a form, right? So the whole point of this is when we save the data, we want to post it to a form, right? We want to send the data to post it from the form. We want to post it to our endpoint, our controller endpoint for processing, right? So doing the CRUD operations. There we go. That's what I'm trying to get at. So form, the action will point to itself, and the method will be a post. You can point the action somewhere other than itself, but for now, we'll just have whatever URL we're on, it'll post back that same URL. So whatever URL we're getting the feature view, we're going to then post back to it. So that means in our feature controller over here, we're going to have a get mapping and a post mapping for the same endpoint. So we have a get mapping for product/product ID/features/feature ID. Okay, that's what's going to happen. This is going to be prepended to all of the stuff because this request mapping annotation is at the class level. So that's going to be more global. It's going to prepend to all the stuff. So we have a post mapping that points to just this endpoint, which is product ID features. We have one post mapping there, but we need to have another post mapping that's more specific that includes a feature ID. Okay, so we need to have a post mapping that points to the feature ID endpoint, or rather the product ID features feature ID endpoint. What should that return? That should return a, let's see, probably, yeah, we'll return a string, and we'll call this update feature. Path variable will be product ID as well as a feature ID, right? Because we have one product ID here that needs to be mapped to something, a path variable, and a feature ID here that needs to be mapped to a path variable. And for now, we'll return, again, whenever we're doing a post, we should return a redirect to an endpoint. So the endpoint here will copy from up here, which is really just going to be the same thing. It's going to be, oops, it escaped. That's annoying. It escaped the, whatchamacallits. What are they called? Double quotes. There we go. Okay, and then here we don't have a feature yet, so we need to load up a feature, as we do up here, based on the product ID. Copy paste. There, now we have a feature, and we also need to, oh, sorry, okay, hold on, we're updating a feature, so we need to pass along in our list of, I'm really struggling for words today, I'm sorry guys, in our list of parameters for our method, in other words, in our method signature, we can pass along a feature object because that's what's being bound in the front end on the HTML page, right? We're binding these two text elements to the feature object, the title and description. So we can then do this. We can have feature here, which should map those two bound text boxes, the fields, should bind it to this feature object, okay? Now, with that, we also need to make sure, just like we did in previous videos way back when, we need to make sure that the feature object here also includes critical information that we don't want to show. So we have input type hiddens, where we bind hidden fields to the feature properties, such as the ID of the feature, and also the product ID. Okay, because those are going to be important. Features have IDs and product IDs, title descriptions, and the status as well. So we'll bring in the status too. So these are all important because if we don't populate these here, they won't be pushed forward in our controller over here. So that means that our feature object, when it gets populated, will be out of date. It won't have the right information, and we're going to mess stuff up if we try to save it back to the database. That's the whole point of this update feature method, is to resave the data that's on the screen. So we want to say feature repository or service dot save. Okay, but we don't have a save yet, right? What do we have? We have a create feature and that's it. So the service should have a save method as well, where we pass in a feature object, and it probably should return a feature as well. All right, we don't need to redefine it because it's already been defined up here when we're passing it in. So this save method doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. So we're doing a lot here in this video, but that's all right. This is a fast-paced environment for learning. Feature repo. The feature repository now, we can invoke a save, right? So save is already built into the repositories, again, through JPA repository, which we looked at in many times in previous videos. We extend the JPA repository, which gives us our CRUD operations. One of the CRUD operations that we get is the save operation. So the service that we're on, the feature service, remember we have controllers, services, repositories. That's our how we lay out the design of our application. This is just a good way to lay things out. Have a controller layer, a service layer, and a repository layer. So our service layer invokes the repository stuff. So the services talk to repositories, controllers talk to services. We should never really have controllers talking directly to repositories. Just that's good design practice to do, or good practice to get into in terms of design. So our repository, we can invoke the save because that comes from the JPA repository, but it wants an object, an entity, which we pass in as the feature. Okay, and by default, this save operation actually returns the entity that you're saving. So we can really just say return feature repository.save because it's going to return a feature object already. If I hover over the save method, it returns a feature object because that's just what the repository does, what the save method does in the repository by default. Pretty cool. So a fairly simple save method here. So then that now back in our controller layer will work. Our save will work because we just created the service that does a save that calls the repository save. And then we can just do a redirect back to our feature if we really want to. So, okay, that should work. Now there's one more critical step that I left out, but not on purpose. The feature here, we're referring to the feature.id, feature.product, feature.status, feature.title, feature.description, but we don't have a feature on the model yet. So we're going to get an error. We need to have a feature on the model. How do we do that? In our get mapping, which is right here, we need to get a feature, right? We need to put that on the model. Right now, all we do is return the view. We don't have a feature object on the model. So if we're in the get mapping for a feature ID, that should mean that we've already created a feature in the database, right? So basically all we need to do is do a feature service dot, I guess we should do find by ID, and we'll pass in a feature ID. And this is going to return a feature object. And this doesn't exist yet, so let's create this. And the reason why I call it find by ID is because you can do a feature repository.find by ID. That's built in. Okay, we'll pass in the feature ID. So again, the repositories have the standard CRUD operations. We can return that guy. Oh, but there's one thing. It returns an optional. So it's a few things going on here. Again, I'm going quick because I want to get this done. The feature service, we created a new method called find by ID. Okay. Again, services call repositories. Controllers call services. Controllers never talk directly or shouldn't talk directly to repositories. That's why I created this find by ID method in the service class. But the find by ID in the repository, again, by default, this is created because of the JPA repository stuff that we extended. It returns an optional feature. So what we need to do is our service should return an optional as well, because it should. It's not guaranteed that we're going to find a feature in the database just because we pass in any old ID, right? There's no guarantee it's going to return a real. There's no guarantee that that's actually in the database, right? And that's what this optional means. It means, it can be null essentially. So it forces us to deal with the possibility of it being null. Okay, so essentially this helps to get around null pointer exceptions. So because we are returning an optional feature, what I like to do is call it OPT. Okay, change the name of the variable. So then we say if feature opt is present, then we can say model.put. Ooh, we don't have a model yet, so let's put a model. Model map. No, sorry, model map. Model is how we do it. Model map is the type of object that I use. So now we can say model.put feature feature opt.get. Come on, .get. Okay. So basically, what I'm doing here is from the optional feature, I'm saying so long as it is present, so long as we actually have something in there, we can get what's in there from the feature optional object, which really just returns the actual feature object itself. And there you go. We put that on the model. Okay. Otherwise, there is no feature, in which case that's actually not going to work. So we should probably handle some sort of situation where we don't have a feature. Really, this means that we have an invalid feature ID, right? So that's something that we should handle. We don't have time to do that right now, so I'll put a little to do. Handle the situation where we can't find a feature by the feature ID. Okay, so I'll put a little to do there. So cool, that will find us the feature and put it on the model and then return the view, and there we go. So let's give that a shot now. Let's go to our localhost 8080. Let's log in. And let's see for, let's say, product number 1. Oh, sorry, products. I need to do, let's rename this just to product 1, just to make things simple in terms of getting access to it. So what is it? P/product1 is what we'll do. There we go. So now we can say create feature request, right? So boom, we have an error. What is the error? It's a 500 error. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the screen. Let's check our log, because the log will look a little bit better. So invalid property, product ID of being class, whatever. So I think it doesn't like this, probably. So why doesn't it like that? Let's take a look at our feature. Oh, right. It's not called product ID. So remember, I was ranting about how the names I use here have to be the same names I use here. Right? I was ranting about that, and then I didn't follow my own advice. I put product ID, but the feature doesn't have a product ID. It has a product. So I need to populate not product ID, but product. Let me refresh the page, see if that makes a difference. It did not. Did it need to reboot? No, it didn't need to reboot. What's the error? Let me clear the log and refresh again. Clear log, refresh. Could not parse feature.description / oopsie doodly. / should not be in there. It should be outside of the double quote. If you guys saw that earlier, you were probably screaming at me. Well, there you go. Now I found it. Refresh. There we go. So now we have a title and a description. Oh, I forgot the button. There needs to be a button to submit this form. So we need to have a button here. We'll put it in another div. Button type equals, we'll call it a submit. Class equals btn primary. We'll call this save. Refresh. There we go. So title, let's see. This is a title for a feature, right? So I'm trying to think of what would be a valid feature request. So I don't know, make it better. Make the product better when handling errors or something like that. So there's a few things. Like I said, the front end right now is ugly. And I realized maybe a text box is not the right thing. Maybe we need the text area here, but we'll get to that in a future video. The point is, when I click save, hopefully this will save to the feature ID 3. As you can see, we have product ID 1, feature ID 3. So first, before I click save, let me go and say select star from feature. So as we can see, feature 3 here is pending review status, and it's linked to product ID 1, and there's no description and no title. Okay, same as 3 other ones. Let's see what happens when I click on save. We get a 403 forbidden. Oh, right, I forgot the whenever we're doing a post, we also need to include the CSRF stuff for CSRF protection. Do I have an example that I can copy paste anywhere? Index login, probably login has the, here we go. Is it just this one? Yeah. Boom, ba-doom, ba-doom. Not dashboard. Go back to here and paste this in. So let's go back. Ah, shoot. Make it better and make the product better. There you go. Click save. Cool. So nothing really happened there. You didn't see anything happen. It just sort of it brought us back to the same page. But hopefully we have an update statement in our log now. So if I go back here and do a refresh on the feature, hopefully product ID 3 will now be populated with a title and description. There you go. Description, title, product ID, status. Everything is there. Everything is just as we want it to be. So that's fantastic. Our CRUD operations are now working. And I can prove that by adding an exclamation point to make it better and clicking save. And then coming back here and refreshing. So make it better now has an exclamation point. So working, fantastic, wonderful. So now the next step is we need to make this look prettier, okay? And we probably need to have the workflow be a little bit better in terms of maybe we can display the status as well. The status should maybe actually be displayed and not be hidden. So we'll figure that out. So just, the next step is just let's make it look prettier and find out maybe a better workflow for when we click save, because it happens so quick you can't tell that anything has happened, right? So maybe have some sort of message to say it's saved, or maybe we just have it redirect back to the dashboard or something. I don't know. So we'll have to figure that out in the next video. So thanks so much for following along. As always, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, give the video a like, all that stuff. I'm sure you know how to do all that stuff by now. And yeah, hope to see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. As always, happy learning. Bye for now.